A few years ago, I used to work at Disney as a ride operator. One day, my coworker had a sudden emergency at her home and begged me to cover her evening shift. She offered me a fancy lunch in exchange for taking her place. The day was pretty quiet, with not many customers around. A couple of kids had already taken a ride and left. I was stationed at the ticket cabin, waiting for any more customers to show up. Right as the clock struck 10, which is our closing time, a man appeared out of nowhere outside my cabin. I was startled to see him. He leaned on the counter and pointed at the tickets. I politely informed him that the park was closing, hoping he'd understand and leave, but he didn't seem to budge. There was something odd about him. He kept his hand on the counter and stared at me without saying a word. The ride I operated was at the far end of the amusement park, kind of isolated from the other rides. Because it was closing time, there were no other visitors nearby, and I couldn't see any security guards around either. Faced with the situation, I had no choice but to let him get on the ride. I pressed the start button, and the ride began. The ride was a speedy one, but the man didn't react at all. He didn't scream or show any signs of fear. Instead, he sat there, completely motionless. It gave me an eerie feeling. When the ride's timer finally ended, it slowed down and came to a stop. Strangely, the creepy guy didn't get up to leave. He remained seated on the ride. I told him that the park was closing and he needed to exit, but he simply pointed at the ticket, as if instructing me to start the ride again. At this point, fear was creeping in. I took out my phone with shaky hands to call for help. But before I could dial, someone suddenly yanked my hair from behind. I screamed, and to my horror, it was the same guy. He spoke, demanding that I start the ride again because he wanted to take another turn. Feeling utterly helpless, I pressed the button. The ride started up once more. As I glanced around, I noticed that the amusement park's lights were turning off, one by one. Terrified, I huddled in the cabin, trying to stay hidden. Then I saw the security guard running toward me. He urgently told me to stop the ride and shut down everything. I informed him about the guy in the ride, but when we both looked, the ride was empty. There was no sign of the creepy man. In the end, the man vanished into thin air. The whole experience was chilling, leaving me bewildered and frightened. The park closed down for the night, and we were left trying to make sense of what had just happened. It was a night I would never forget, a night when the boundaries between reality and the unknown seemed to blur in the most unsettling way. I'd been itching to hit the amusement park, and my chance finally arrived on my birthday. I hopped onto a rickety ride and found myself next to a friendly girl. I was stunned by her beauty and kept on glancing at her. She laughed contagiously throughout the ride. I asked her for her name, and by the time that the ride stopped, I had her number. After that, we texted non-stop. She was into the same things that I liked, and the excitement grew as we planned to meet again at the park over the weekend. I couldn't wait to hang out with her once more. When the weekend rolled around, I arrived at the park with anticipation bubbling in my chest. But as soon as I saw her, something felt off. The girl from the last time was there, but she seemed different. But I couldn't put my finger on what had changed about her. She started talking about bizarre things like time travel, living in different centuries. Then she whipped out an old necklace with a tiny picture inside. She claimed it was made for her by a goldsmith a long time ago. I shrugged it off, suggesting that maybe it was her grandma, but her eyes bore into me, intense and full of conviction. As the day progressed, her behavior became even stranger. She clung to me as if her life depended on it. When we separated after the date, I went straight home. I knew I couldn't keep on being friends with her, but her texts turned into a constant stream, flooding my phone even when I didn't respond. It started getting freaky. I tried to distance myself, hoping she'd get the hint, but she persisted. Every time I blocked her, she would text me from a new number. Feeling trapped, I opted for a new phone in a desperate bid to escape her incessant messages. The calls finally stopped, and I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. Yet, the memory of her words and those intense eyes still haunts me and stays like a shadow in the back of my mind. I told a few of my friends about this crazy encounter. Everyone finds it crazy and creepy and tells me that I was lucky that I got rid of this person, whoever it was. I have a deep fascination for horror movies and all things eerie, so when my friend recounted her spine-chilling adventure in a haunted house at an amusement park, I was immediately intrigued. Determined to experience it myself, I strategically planned to visit on a weekend, just before closing time, hoping to be the sole visitor. After relishing several rides and attractions, the moment of truth arrived as the clock neared 8 p.m. It was time to explore the much-anticipated haunted house. Stepping into the eerie attraction, I was met by a guide who would navigate me through the haunted house. The house is a labyrinth of macabre scenes, adorned with skeletons, vampires, and all manners of spooky paraphernalia. While ominous soundtracks and alternating red and green lights enveloped the atmosphere in terror, I strolled through seemingly unfazed. In fact, I felt proud of myself for not succumbing to fear. The guide led me through the haunted house, showcasing its various sinister aspects. Eventually, we entered a room that plunged into complete darkness. Oddly, none of the usual spotlights illuminated this chamber, compelling me to employ my phone's flashlight to cautiously tread forward. To my surprise, the guide was no longer with me. I was utterly alone in the inky abyss. As I gingerly navigated the pitch-black room in search of an exit, an unsettling feeling started gnawing at my insides. Panic began to simmer as I realized the door I had entered from was inexplicably locked, trapping me inside. My desperation to escape intensified as I called for help, my fists pounding against the unyielding door. Suddenly, the faint echo of footsteps appeared behind me, and I knew something was wrong about this room. My heart raced as I turned around, only to confront the gigantic clown figure lurking a mere inches away. His malevolent smile, seemingly frozen in time, coupled with his crimson button nose, rooted me to the spot. Convinced it was another piece of the haunted puzzle, I mustered the courage to inch closer. Yet, as I strained my eyes, I could detect no movement, confirming my assumption that this was just a prop. However, my hopes of escape were soon shattered as I scoured the room in vain for an exit route. Panic surged anew as the realization dawned that I was trapped, a captive of the surreal darkness. Desperation escalated into sheer terror, prompting me to redouble my efforts, pounding on the locked door and calling for help with all my might. Just as despair began to take hold, the guide reappeared, unlocking the door and flooding the room with light. Security was swiftly summoned, rescuing me from the clutches of this nightmarish predicament. It was later revealed that the clown, the very entity I had brushed off as a mere prop, was in fact a person who had been stalking me. The horror that I had brushed shoulders with in films and fiction had unexpectedly seeped into my reality, etching an indelible mark on my psyche.